There are stories whispered in the dark. Tales of places forgotten by time. Where walls remember screams, and shadows walk alone. Tonight, I'll take you into one of those stories. This is the house that remembers. But be warned. Once you enter, it never lets you leave. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and listen closely. Because the house is listening too. If this story sent a chill down your spine, don't forget to hit that like button, it helps more souls. I mean, viewers, find us. Want more tales from the dark side? Then subscribe and ring the bell, so you never miss the next haunting. And tell us in the comments, what would you do if the house knew your name? Remember this isn't just a story. It's a warning. They say some legacies are blessings, but others are curses wrapped in old wood and crumbling brick. Mark Reynolds never believed in ghosts, omens, or fate. He was a man of structure, an architect who dealt with blueprints, steel, and logic. But all that began to crumble the moment he received a letter from a law firm in Vermont. You are the sole heir to the Elwood estate. Your great-grandmother, Margaret Elwood, has left the property in your name. He blinked at the letter, confused. He didn't have a great-grandmother named Margaret. At least, no one in his family ever spoke of her. The letter gave no details, just a key enclosed in a small black envelope, and an address scribbled in fading ink. It was the kind of thing you'd expect in a horror novel, not real life. And yet, something about that key felt cold, even in his warm apartment. Like it had been buried in the ground. At first, Mark planned to ignore it. But that night, his dreams changed. He saw fog thick, endless, rolling over a two-story house with peeling white paint. A figure stood at the window on the second floor, watching. And in the dream, he felt like he'd been there before. Like something familiar was calling him back. When he woke, the key was no longer on the table where he'd left it. It was in his hand. The road to the Elwood estate twisted like a dying serpent through the hills of Vermont. It was late afternoon when Mark arrived, but the sky was already bruised with clouds. The air was unnaturally still, no birdsong, no rustling trees. Only the sound of his tires crunching gravel. The house emerged from the mist like something from a forgotten photograph. 3 stories tall, Victorian in design, but hunched like it was tired of standing. The white paint peeled away in long strips, revealing gray wood underneath like skin revealing bone. Its narrow windows were tall, dark, and expressionless, until one flickered. Like someone had just walked past. Mark stopped. Blamed his imagination. He stepped out of the car, the fog curling around his legs like cold hands. There was no welcome mat. No porch light. Just the great wooden door with a rusted handle and the same key he'd received, now icy cold in his pocket. The moment the door creaked open, a heavy wave of air pushed against him, thick with the scent of dust, old wood, and something bitter, like dried roses and burnt sugar. Inside, the hallway stretched long and narrow, lined with fading wallpaper and tall mirrors that distorted his reflection ever so slightly. And there, above the fireplace, hung the painting, a woman in a red dress, elegant, timeless. But her eyes, they didn't just stare. They watched. Mark chose the bedroom on the second floor, the one with the least cobwebs and a window that opened, though barely. The bed was antique, carved mahogany, its mattress thin but intact. He laid out his sleeping bag on top of it. No way he was lying directly on that musty thing. The house groaned with every step, as if it resented being disturbed. But Mark, tired from the long drive, tried to ignore the noises. He chalked it up to the age of the place, the wood settling, the wind outside. Normal things. Explainable things. At 2:13 a.m. he woke up. The room was freezing. His breath came out in small clouds. No wind. No power failure. Just unnatural cold. Then came the sound. Shhhh, shhhh. Like something being dragged across the floor. At first, it came from downstairs. Then closer. Step, scrape, step, scrape. A slow, deliberate pattern. Something or someone was moving through the hallway, dragging something heavy. Mark sat up, heart pounding. He told himself it had to be an animal. Maybe raccoons, a branch brushing the house, but when he crept to the door and opened it, the hallway was empty. Except the painting downstairs. He could see it clearly from the landing. The woman in red, her head had turned. Now, she was looking straight up the stairs. Right at him. The next morning, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed inside the house, like it had shifted overnight. The walls seemed closer. The mirrors, darker. And though he tried to laugh it off, the memory of that painting, her head turned, her eyes climbing the stairs, refused to leave him. By noon, he decided to explore the cellar. Maybe he could find something, records, blueprints, maybe even old letters that could help him understand who Margaret Elwood really was. Why the house had been left to him, a stranger to its history. He found the cellar door behind the kitchen, half hidden behind a leaning china cabinet. The wooden stairs creaked under his weight, each step colder than the last. The air smelled like rot and wet stone. The light bulb above barely flickered to life. Shadows loomed in the corners. Then he saw it, a wooden box tucked beneath a stack of broken furniture, covered in cobwebs and old lace curtains. He dragged it out, coughing from the dust. The lid was sealed with wax and an old red ribbon. It felt heavier than it should. Inside, carefully arranged like artifacts, were stacks of yellowed letters. Handwritten in elegant cursive, sealed in envelopes marked with the initials M.E. He opened the top one. It read, "The house does not forget." It watches. It listens. It remembers what was done here, and it never forgives. Mark's hands trembled, because suddenly, the light above him went out. And in the darkness, he heard it again: step, scrape, step, scrape. But this time, it was coming from behind him. Mark ran up the cellar stairs 2 at a time, the sound of dragging behind him matching his heartbeat. He slammed the door shut and locked it, chest heaving, palms cold with sweat. The house stood in utter silence, now too silent. Even the creaking had stopped. He told himself he was just rattled, sleep deprived, maybe even hallucinating. But something inside him whispered the truth: the house is awake now, because it knows you're here. That night, sleep came only in broken fragments. Every sound, floorboards settling, wind brushing the windows, felt too deliberate. Like something was moving just out of sight. At exactly 3 a.m. Mark opened his eyes. He didn't know why, just did. Like something had nudged him awake. The room was pitch dark, except for the closet door. It was open. Just slightly. He didn't remember leaving it that way. He sat up, eyes locked on the narrow crack. The shadows inside were thick, almost moving. Then, slowly, the door creaked wider. There was no sound. No footsteps. But a shape stepped forward. A woman. Thin. Dressed in something old, tattered, flowing like smoke. But where her face should be been nothing. Just blank, glistening skin. No eyes. No mouth. No features. And yet he felt her stare. She tilted her head. One hand lifted, fingers twitching like a spider's legs. Mark blinked once. And she was gone. But scratched into the wood of the closet door, in long, jagged letters, were the words, "She never left. She just watches." By sunrise, Mark was a man unraveling. He hadn't truly slept in 2 days, and every corner of the house seemed to lean closer now, like the walls were listening. He knew there was someone still here. Watching. Waiting. He remembered the old Victorian layout from the blueprints he'd found in the cellar. There should be been a 3rd-floor attic above the guest room. But when he looked around the ceiling, there was no visible entrance. No pull cord. No ladder. Just smooth plaster. But that evening, while shifting an old bookcase in the hallway, he heard something hollow thud. He knocked again. Hollow. A false wall. He pried it open with a crowbar he found in the tool shed. Behind the panel was a narrow passageway, steep and lined with cracked wooden steps that spiraled upward into shadow. The air was thick with dust and something more, metallic. The attic was like stepping into a forgotten world. A child's nursery, untouched for decades. Faded wallpaper. A rocking chair. A broken porcelain doll staring up from the floor with one eye missing. and on a small desk bound in cracked leather was a diary. Margaret Elwood S. Mark opened it. Page after page of madness. She wrote of whispers in the walls, of dreams where blood poured from the ceiling, of her husband's betrayal, and finally, of her choice. He lied. He brought another woman here. The house showed me. The house told me what must be done. So I did it. I ended him. Mark's breath caught. Then came the final line, I buried him beneath the parlor floor. The house is satisfied for now. Behind him, the rocking chair began to move. Slowly. Back and forth. Back and forth. That night, Mark didn't just dream. He descended. The moment his eyes shut, he found himself back in the house, but everything was wrong. The wallpaper bled. The floors pulsed like living flesh. The mirrors reflected nothing but darkness. The house had twisted into something alive. Something ancient. And it knew he was there. He walked through endless corridors that bent and looped impossibly, as if space itself had warped. Every door he opened led to another room filled with whispers, hundreds of voices murmuring in unison. He couldn't understand the language, but he felt the hatred in it. The hunger. Then he saw her again. The woman in red. Only now, her face wasn't blank. It was his. She opened her mouth, and his voice whispered, "You were never meant to leave. You are what's missing." He tried to run, but the hallway stretched like elastic, doors vanishing as he reached for them. The walls began to bleed. A crimson river ran down the staircase. Then he fell, spiraling downward through darkness, faster, deeper, until the house swallowed him whole. He woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, nails digging into his palms. But when he sat up in bed, something was wrong. The diary, the one he left in the attic. It was now on his bedside table. Open. And written in fresh black ink on the final page was a new line, "Now you've seen it too. You've stepped inside the dream. And the dream doesn't let go." Mark couldn't escape the feeling that the house was closing in. Its presence was undeniable, alive, like a vast, unseen force wrapping around him. Every time he tried to leave, the road outside would vanish into a thick wall of fog. The car refused to start, its engine sputtering and dying with a sound that seemed too deliberate, too unnatural. And the worst part, no matter where he went, the house followed him. It was in the air, in his skin, in the very ground he walked on. He thought about leaving. Really leaving. But something in his gut stopped him, fear. And a strange, almost magnetic pull back toward the parlor. The one place he hadn't fully explored. The room where Margaret had killed her husband. Where she buried him beneath the floorboards. The house had a way of making him stay. That night, he decided he would dig. He had to know the truth. With a shovel and a crowbar, Mark tore at the floor in the parlor, the wood cracking and splintering under his hands. The smell of old earth and decay filled the air. The deeper he went, the colder it became. His fingers numbed as they touched something hard. Something metal. He pulled it free. A small, iron-bound chest, rusted, but still intact. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside, wrapped in blackened cloth, was a skull. The skull of a man. But it was wrong. Its eyes were still there. Hollow, dark, but filled with something that looked almost like rage. As Mark touched it, a sudden sharp cold shot through his chest. His breath stopped. The wall seemed to close in on him, pressing against his ribs. He looked up only to see the door to the parlor slam shut. And then, the whispering started. The voices from the walls. Louder now. Mark wasn't alone anymore. The whispering was louder now, insistent, urgent. It filled his mind, seeping into his ears, vibrating against his skull. The walls pulsed, breathing in time with his heartbeat. The house had awakened, and it was hungry. Mark slammed his shoulder into the parlor door, but it wouldn't budge. The iron chest, with the skull inside, began to vibrate, as if the house itself was trying to reach through him, to consume him. His legs gave out, dropping him to his knees on the cold floor. A sharp pain shot through his spine, making his vision blur. The skull. It was calling to him. Tugging at his very soul. Come back. Come home. And that's when he understood. The house wasn't just a place. It wasn't just a building. It was alive, and it had always been alive, waiting for the right soul to bind with it. Margaret had known. She had chosen this place over her family, over everything. The house had fed on her pain, her guilt. And when her husband died, the house had grown stronger. It had claimed her. It had claimed them all. The voices now weren't just whispers, they were screams, demanding him to stay, to belong. Mark's mind twisted as the temperature dropped even further, frost forming in the air around him. He reached for the chest, the cold metal burning his skin. And in that moment, the skull's eyes opened. Hollow, but alive. They locked onto his. You cannot leave, the voice of Margaret echoed, but not from her lips. The house remembers. It remembers everything. And it remembers you. The walls began to stretch and contort, the ceiling lowering, the floor buckling. The room was closing in on him. The house was claiming him, just as it had claimed the others before him. Mark gasped for breath, his body cold and stiff, his vision darkening. He was no longer just a visitor. He was a part of the house now, bound by blood and bone to its insatiable hunger. The door to the parlor opened on its own. The cold air pulled him forward. The house had claimed its new resident. Mark couldn't scream. His mouth opened, but the sound, it was swallowed by the very air around him. The house had become a tomb, his tomb. His heart thundered in his chest, his limbs frozen in place. The air around him felt thick, as though it had substance alive, twisting like a living thing. The shadows that filled the corners of the parlor now swarmed together, swirling in a vortex. And then, he saw her. Margaret. Standing in front of him, but his face was frozen in that same blank, empty stare. Her lips didn't move, but he could hear her voice, whispering in his mind. You thought you could leave. You thought you were different. But the house remembers. You are no exception. The room grew darker, colder. The walls creaked, and the floors groaned under some unseen weight. He wanted to move, to run, to scream, but he was rooted, like the house itself had grown into his very being. From the corner of his eye, he saw them other shapes, other figures. The people who had been swallowed by the house before him. Their faces were pale and hollow, their eyes wide in eternal terror. Their mouths opened, but the sound was faint, like a chorus of desperate whispers, lost forever in the depths of the house. Mark felt his body begin to change. It was slow at first, his skin turning cold, his limbs growing stiff. He was fading, becoming part of the house. He could feel the house inside him, wrapping its fingers around his very soul. Then, as though in some final, tragic moment of clarity, he understood the truth. The house was never going to let him go. It never let anyone go. He could feel the weight of its memories, the weight of every broken soul it had claimed over the years. Each one added to its hunger, each one feeding its endless thirst for more. And as the darkness swallowed him whole, Mark's last thought was a quiet, horrified realization. He wasn't the last. The house would remember again.